Hello everyone. Thank you very much indeed to TEDx for the opportunity to come and speak to you today about a subject which I hope you'll find not only interesting but very relevant to society today. The idea of influence and persuasion. What causes us to be persuaded to make certain decisions, to be influenced, to behave the way that we actually do. I'm hoping that many of you will find some of the information that I have to present to you today surprising. Often the factors that we think influence and persuade our behaviour is very different to the realities of what actually does. But before I get into that, let me talk about a subject that I think will be of no surprise to you, a phenomena of modern day life. Let me see if this is working here. We have to do it. The left clicker. Okay, thank you. Let's talk about a factor of modern day life that won't be a surprise to you. The idea that we live today in a society that is the single most information overloaded, stimulus saturated environment that has ever existed on this planet. You know, we are literally overwhelmed with data and information. And it's very difficult sometimes to pick our way through all this information and decide what is relevant to pay attention to and what we should discard. It's a subject that social scientists have been looking to understand for many years now, about 60 years of research into the science of how people are influenced and persuaded. What are the factors in our information overloaded life that do cause us to pay attention and react to certain information and discard other information? And here's the first surprise that this body of social science has actually found. Rarely in isolation does information influence or persuade us. So the idea that we just give information to people and expect them to make rational, logical decisions, that often isn't the case. What the case is that it's information that's presented in a particular psychological context or which aligns to one of the fundamental triggers of human decision making. It's that information that causes us most likely to be influenced and persuaded. And this is not working, so let's do it. And the evidence that we have suggests that actually these decision triggers, these fundamental contexts, are relatively few in number. Whilst there may be thousands of ways that we can present a message, the vast majority of the most successful ones fall into just one of 6 universal decision heuristics, or principles of influence and persuasion. This is work that's predominantly been led over the last 35 years by my colleague Robert Cialdini, a social psychologist from Arizona State University. And whilst time is limited today and I can't review all 6 of these principles, what I am going to do is to review one that I think is particularly relevant to modern day society, the idea of consensus or social proof. The fact that people are often influenced by what others around them are doing. And what I'd like to do is pose the question, could we apply an understanding of how people react to the behavior of others to persuade people to make good choices, to make pro-society choices towards things like reducing their energy consumption, behaving in more environmentally friendly ways, behaving in more pro-social ways? And to answer that question, what I'm going to do is, first of all, take a trip to the local restaurant. How many of you eat regularly in restaurants? Let's see a show of hands. You know, the vast majority of you in the audience. There's a study that's just been conducted recently that shows that a restaurant can employ a single strategy that immediately increases the number of people, like you and I, that choose to buy a dessert from that restaurant by over 20%. And here's what they do. On the menu of dessert choices, next to their most popular dessert, they put a little sign that says, "This is our most popular dessert." The very fact that they just alert us to a popular choice causes more people not only to choose that particular choice, but actually to choose the whole category of choices of desserts. Now, this idea of the behaviour of others is widely misunderstood, I'm going to claim. And it's widely misunderstood in 2 ways. Firstly, when we try to interpret our own behaviour, we underestimate the power of others' behaviour around us. And this makes sense. You know, we like to think that we make our own logical, rational decisions with our own choice. But very often we do not. And I'm going to give an example from a study conducted by Robert Cialdini and one of his colleagues, Wes Schultz, over in the University of California, who went door to door to over 800 householders and asked them the following question. Why do you behave in a pro-environmental way? Why do you recycle? You know, why do you turn down your heater? Why do you turn off your air conditioning? Why are you trying to save energy? And here's what they tell us. Most people say, we do it because we're an environmentally friendly family. Some householders said, well, actually, we want to behave in this way to benefit future societies. Some actually claimed that they could save money. But relatively few householders said, well, the reason that we recycle is because all our neighbours recycle, the descriptive social norm. But actually, when you correlate their behaviour with the actual behaviour of their neighbours, what you actually find is it's the only reason why people recycle. If they see others around them recycling too. So not only do we actually underestimate the influence of others' behaviour around us, when we're informed of that fact, we actually deny it has an influence. Now, it gets worse before it gets better. Because not only do we underestimate our own decisions, when it comes to persuading others, we underestimate the power of social norm and consensus information as well. And it has often catastrophic results. It makes very good sense that public communicators, policymakers, government officials would want to draw attention to regrettably frequent problems in society. The number of teenage pregnancies that are rising, the number of people that commit benefit fraud, the number of people that, binge drink. But here's the problem. By communicating that regrettably frequent unwanted behaviour, we often actually increase it. Because underneath that message that says, look at all the people that are doing this unwanted thing, there is an undercutting message that actually says, look at all the people who are doing it. And so what we often find when we see headlines in the newspapers decrying rises in truancy, decrying the number of people that are, committing benefit fraud, the large number of people that aren't, filling out their tax forms on time, what we often do is increase that behaviour unwittingly. I'll give you an example. So our university is at Arizona State in Phoenix. There are a number of national parks in Arizona. I would, for those of you who haven't been, thoroughly recommend a trip at some point. Here are some pictures from the National Petrified Forest Park in Arizona. This particular problem was alerted to us by a graduate student of ASU who was coming over to Phoenix to complete his studies. And he took a day trip to the Petrified Forest, a national park that has a particular problem. Visitors to the park will often pick up pieces of wood, petrified forest and crystals from the floor and take them home as little souvenirs. And visitors are alerted to this particular problem by a sign at the entrance of this petrified forest that points out that many past visitors have in fact stolen wood and crystals from the forest floor, and as a result undermined the natural resources of the forest and spoilt the visit for future visitors to the park. And they point out that in fact last year alone some 14 tons of petrified forest wood and crystal was stolen, mostly a small piece at a time. The graduate student who actually visited the park with his fiancée, who, by the way, he describes as the single most honest person he has ever met in his life, he explained to us, he said, well, I hadn't finished reading the sign when I felt her elbow dig me in the ribs. And she whispered, we better get ours quick then. Could it be that, understandably, the park wanting to raise the awareness of this unwanted theft, you know, understandably to hopefully persuade people that they shouldn't do it themselves, are unwittingly actually increasing that unwanted theft. Well, this student, along with a team of social psychologists, went actually back to the park and conducted a study there. So for several weeks they removed all signage from the park and found that actually with no information at all about the theft of any crystals or petrified forests in the park, they recorded a theft rate of just less than 3%. Here's what they found. When they put the signs back up showing that many past visitors do in fact steal, theft tripled overnight. So the park's crime prevention strategy is in fact a crime promotion strategy. It was only when a sign that actually said, even if one person steals or takes wood or crystals from the floor, does it undermine the experience for everyone? That was the sign that actually was the most successful in reducing theft. Okay, so it's clear that the behavior of many others around us has a very powerful influence over our own. How could we use this? Well, I'm going to leave you with two examples. For those of you that travel and stay in hotels, either frequently or less frequently, you've probably recognized over the last few years that hotels are starting to place in your bathroom a little influence strategy to get you to reuse your towels and linens during your stay. Principally, they do it to save the environment. You know, think of all the detergent, think of all the oil, the heat, the energy that goes into washing and cleaning towels and linens. So please do your bit. Be an environmentally friendly guest and reuse your towels during your stay. What we find actually is in a series of studies conducted by two of my colleagues, again Robert Cialdini and Noah Goldstein, the co-authors of our book, is that this standard environmental appeal seems to be the most common across hotels. Interestingly though, we found data that suggested that the longer that someone stays in a hotel, the more likely they are in fact to reuse their towels. In fact, a guest that stays for 4 nights or more is more than 75% more likely to reuse their towels at least once. So we thought to ourselves, what would happen if we just put that fact on the little cards in the bathroom? Generally speaking, hotels will have a reuse rate of about 30%. 35% rather, if they go with the environmental message. When we change the cards to say the majority of guests who stay in this hotel actually do reuse their towel, we got a 26% increase in recycling. Entirely honest, entirely ethical, and very, very cost effective too. We didn't need to incentivize people, we didn't need to threaten people, we didn't need to create new legislations or laws, we just simply informed guests of what the majority of people do. It does beg a question, that question being, okay, if we follow the lead of many others, which others are we most likely to follow? And the evidence we have is that it's those others that are most similar to us. For scientific reasons, as well as entertainment reasons, we decided to place a third sign in hotel bathrooms that said, oh, by the way, the majority of guests who stayed in this particular room before you reuse their towels. You're probably sitting there thinking, if I went into a hotel bathroom and saw a sign that said, the guests that stayed in my room before me reuse their towel, the first thing you're going to do is go, is this the same towel? But we thought we'd try it anyway, and what was interesting was that it was the very most successful of all the strategies. So, pointing out what others are doing, particularly those others that are closest environmentally or in a location or situationally to you, can be a very, very persuasive thing to do. So, let me get back to this point about energy consumption, how we could reduce it, how we can use energy more responsibly. One of the things that we found in this particular piece of research, conducted over 50,000 householders, is that giving people information about how they could be more environmentally friendly, how they could benefit future societies, how they could save money, does very little at influencing or persuading them to reduce their energy consumption. It's only actually when we tell them that more and more of their neighbours are actually reducing their energy consumption does it actually come down. Now, the question here is this a sustainable strategy? Is it sustainable? Well, let me show you an example of what your energy bill might look like in the future. Here on your energy bill, not only does it point out how much electricity you've used this month, it will also point out how you compare to your next door neighbour. And also, whether or not you are actually using more or less than your comparable neighbours, and interestingly, how much more money you are paying for your energy resources than your neighbours if in fact you are using more. And then if you are using more, you'll notice that on the energy bill there are 2 or 3 additional tips that household can take to reduce their consumption next time. And one of the things that we've actually found over a period of 10 months with 6 different suppliers is that typically we get a steady state reduction of about 2.5%. Now, it doesn't sound like an awful lot, but this is I think still a significant contribution towards managing the limited resources that we actually have. And what I think is particularly interesting and fruitful in this regard is that across any demographic, whether it's age, whether it's income, that steady state reduction remains constant. So it seems to be a universal communication strategy that is being employed here in a very, very effective way. So what I'd like to do is leave you with the idea that actually very often when we in a society face growing problems where we need to, reduce our consumption, where we need to, increase and promote pro-social behaviour, governments typically will take the legislative approach, they'll take the taxation approach, they'll take the let's have a new law. And I'm not suggesting that we should ignore those. I think in the right context they are very, very important factors that drive and influence behaviour. But I also think that we should be paying attention to the social psychological factors that cause people to be influenced and persuaded to make choices, such as social proof and some of the others that I unfortunately haven't had the time to share with you today, but I'm hoping I've generated enough interest in some of you to actually go and find out more. So with that regard, I'd like to thank you very much for your attention, and if there's any questions.